South Africa, and I was grown up under a man called President Nelson Mandela, who kept reminding that if there's any power you have in the world to conquer anything, and that is education. So education, 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 and it was very clear. Nasreen took that engagement to another level. It was fantastic, Nasreen, and very absorbing, and you brought realities of African continent towards what we must do and how we must bring culture of peace through pushing education to the next level. And then the last session by fantastic moderator, Melissa. Melissa spoke about youth. She engaged youth. Again, I remind everyone, we're talking about Africa. The median age of African people is 17 to 18. We are a very young continent. And when we are a young continent, we can't discuss peace and culture without the predominant population, which is the youth. Youth empowerment, youth education, youth's role. I must say that in Africa we are blamed that we are led by very old people. One is standing in front of you, but older and older than me, who are leading presidents. But I think the continent can only be protected and saved if there's a blend of both the maturity of the old, but the youthfulness of the youth. And I think if we don't bring that together, we will not win Africa as a continent. So peace cannot be taken if our next generation is not ready for that peace. So I'm very grateful for Melissa for such an absorbing engagement. And that brings us to today. Well, we can talk about water, we can talk about education, we can talk about youth. What we've left out is the biggest component, that is communities. And I think today's session will be fostering a culture of peace within communities. Africa believes in communities. I come from a land where we taught Ubuntu as a word. What Ubuntu means is, I can't exist without you. We exist together. And together is only one word, and that is communities. It's a community that makes a reality. No government can stand in front of a powerful community. And I think if Africa needs to be powerful, it needs to be powerful from the grassroots, from the community level. We pray well. We are a religious community as Africa, but on the other side, we are very vibrant. We are strong with our youth. We just need to flare up, and I think the continent is ready to take over eventually. And I'm so grateful to the president of NGO Liaison Committee, Svetlomira, for thinking about Africa in the Africa Week, organizing this. She has done this single-handedly with few of us supporting, but with one common vision to say, let's in this Africa Week, we cannot go without the partnership with the Mohammed's unit, which is the partnership of the unit of Africa leading, the Directorate of Africa. And then together came up with this idea that we're going to have some sessions, absorbing sessions. But I think, Svetlomira, this is a start. The future is that you leave a legacy for many more to come in this committee and keep organizing every Africa Week, bringing the best talent from Africa together, because there's no way Africa can resolve their problems without Africans. So thank you for all that work that you did. With that note, colleagues, allow me to welcome today's moderator and a very good friend of ours, an ex-president of the Liaison Committee, somebody who we all go to as our parent. He knows everything. His name is Davide. Davide, please come on the stage. And guys, let's give Davide a round of applause. And he has asked that I invite Brenda Coffey. Thank you, Brenda. Brenda's from Cameroon. And I can promise you that I can leave with safety in the safest hands together. Thank you. Over to you.
Hello. Thank you, Ramnek, for this recap, and also inspiring recap, I would say. So yes, today, last session is fostering a culture of peace within communities. And basically, the idea is to ground the broader peace conversation within lived African communities realities, while offering participants practical frameworks and also talking about policies and even giving you some other examples of good practices. I must say that this is the most disrupted session of this forum, because as you can see in the program, we were hoping to have many speakers with us today on stage. But you know, also realities that sometimes hit us very strongly about flights, about visas, about strikes and all kind of disruptions. So we have most of our panelists online. I think they will appear in a moment, but I'm very happy to introduce them. First, I would like to introduce the real moderator of this session, member of the steering committee, vice president of Arterial Network, Stéphanie Capfunde, who has really imagined this session today. She will join us online. We will have also Ambassador Aryowali, Director of the Citizen and Diaspora Director at the African Union Commission. We will have Sally Nkube from Zimbabwe, Women Coalition of Zimbabwe, Equality Now and regional representative of Equality Now for Southern Africa. We have here Brenda Wadeko Kofi, cultural manager and specialist in arts diplomacy across Africa. We have Blessing Abeng, who's the last one that couldn't come really. We learned this just a few hours ago. Blessing is branding and communication expert and co-founder and director of communication at Ingressi for Good. Then we have Milton Nyamanzabo from Zimbabwe, founder and director of the Hub for African Peace and Innovation. And Elizabeth Apampa from Togo, she's now in Senegal, founder of Women Rights and Child Protection and deputy coordinator of the International Council for Dialogue and Partnership in Togo. And Anesu Chikumba, also from Zimbabwe, founder of Unpublished Africa. I see that all of you are online. I'm glad. We are prepared to have some problems, to handle some problems, technical problems, but we hope that those problems will just don't appear. So, without further ado, I think we will start maybe with the Ambassador Aryowali, Director of the Citizen and Diaspora Director at the African Union Commission. Mr. Ambassador, welcome. I can see you are connected. The floor is yours. And you are muted, and if we can...
Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. And I would like to start by words of appreciation, and in particular appreciation to Ambassador Mohammed Al-Fanawani, the Director of Priority Africa, who's had this idea of expanding our cooperation, which is already witnessing a major leap and boost between UNESCO and the African Union, to include that very important civil society dimension. So through that, I would like to thank Madame Svetlomira Stoyanova, the chairperson of the NGO UNESCO Liaison Committee, and of course our dear sister, Madame Sabina Colombo, the head of the unit for the civil society partnerships, for that particular invitation. I was supposed to join you at the opening session, but some of the logistical challenges prevented from that, but I'm very, very glad to be able to join you, at least virtually, at this very important, more or less closing session of an important week. We appreciate that UNESCO has dedicated 1 week to celebrate Africa, or even more. And we very much have UNESCO also on board at the African Union. In fact, I was just speaking at an opening session of the CELAC African Friendship and Day, and we were very happy to host Dr. Rita, your liaison director office in Addis Ababa. So in fact, the topic that we are addressing today, the fostering a culture of peace within communities, falls squarely within the prerogative of promotion of the culture of peace, promotion of conflict resolution within Africa. And I would like to address that through 3 C's: the concept, the counter-conflict, and the culture. In fact, the culture of peace concept was first defined in Africa during the International Congress on Peace in the Minds of Men, organized by UNESCO in Yamoussoukro, Côte d'Ivoire, and in 1989. And therefrom, that concept gained more space, gained more attention within the United Nations General Assembly, with a more concrete definition, with a wider scope of the concept, including values, beliefs, systems, forms of spirituality, local knowledge and technologies, traditions, and forms of culture and artistic expression. So the very concept, the first of the C's, Africa stands proud to have contributed to it. But then the counter-conflict aspect of culture of peace, once again, this is well anchored in the discourse and the activities and the conceptual map of Africa. Aspiration 4 of Agenda 2063 aspires for a peaceful and secure Africa, but also through the use of mechanisms that promote a dialogue-centered approach for conflict prevention, for conflict resolution. One of the Agenda 2063 flagship initiatives, Silencing the Guns, is at the core of the activities being put in place to ensure that Africa is a peaceful and stable continent. In fact, not too long ago, only 4 days ago, the press statement of the 1348th meeting of the Peace and Security Council of the African Union on the 18th of May convened for the commemoration of the International Day of Living Together for Peace. Let's look at the main recommendation that came out. The Council emphasized the need to prioritize the ongoing decision for the incorporation of peace education into national curricula, alongside cultural heritage and the arts, particularly for youth programs aiming to cultivate a durable culture of peace, tolerance, and Pan-Africanism. That's the counter-conflict C. The C of culture, the Luanda Biennial, which is the Pan-African Forum for the Culture of Peace, is an international event that is organized by the EU, UNESCO, and the government of Angola. It disseminates works of art, ideas, and good practices related to the culture of peace. It brings together representatives of government, civil society, the artistic, scientific community, and international organization. It contributes to the implementation of the Plan of Action for a Culture of Peace in Africa, Act for Peace, which was adopted in 2013 in Luanda during the Pan-African Forum, Sources and Resources for a Culture of Peace. So the idea of launching the Biennial for a Culture of Peace draws on an inspiration from the Charter of African Culture Renaissance. The Biennial, as you know, is an African Encounter for Peace, is a special meeting that brings together this multi-stakeholder and it grows a Pan-African movement for peace. I particularly refer to the decision 971 of the Assembly of the Heads of States and Government of the African Union, which met in February 2026 in Addis Ababa, and they have asked and they have directed for the convening of the Biennial of Luanda, the 4th edition, for a culture of peace and nonviolence in Africa, with the theme strengthening water governance in Africa as a tool for conflict prevention, mediation, and resolution in October 2026 in Luanda. So you see how relevant your actual meeting is by also grouping the two together, the culture of peace and the water governance. But I would like also maybe to offer, if I may call it so, a new perspective from the African Union on culture of peace that relates to the Citizen and Diaspora Directorate, which I have the honor to head. We have three major pillars of work. One is civil society or citizen engagement, widely defined. And here, the community level is part and parcel of the work of CEDAW. I would like to particularly point out that we will be organizing in 2027 an activity with the Silencing the Guns initiative with traditional leaders that would also include women and youth. My colleague Ernest Yolo, who is handling this with our Political Affairs, Peace and Security, is with me in this meeting, and we will be very happy to have UNESCO feature that culture of peace in our community level traditional leaders engagement. Something else that we hold biannually is the faith-based organization African Interfaith Dialogue Forum. Now, how more effective could the faith-based organizations and the faith leaders be in reaching to the community level and in fostering the culture of peace? That's an important, I think, one of the three pillars of the work of CEDAW that can strongly align with the UNESCO work in this regard on the culture of peace. But I want to highlight a second pillar of our work. Since February 2024, the African Union leaders assigned or designated 2025 to be the theme of the year on justice for Africans and people of African descent through reparations. At the conclusion of that year, and with the summit that took place a few months ago in Addis Ababa in February, that theme of the year became the theme of the decade, justice for Africans and people of African descent through reparations. Now, one of the cornerstones of the work of the activities and the promotions of that year, which has become a decade, is healing, is recognition of the crimes that were committed against the African people as a base for a peace and reconciliation that should prevail. So once again, I would like to invite UNESCO to integrate reparatory justice into its work on culture of peace, something that we at CEDAW, we would be most happy to contribute to. The third pillar of our work is on diaspora and people of African descent. So here we would be discovering culture of peace across borders, in fact, across oceans. I was just thinking that Director Rita and I were speaking at the opening session of the Afro-Colombian and Afro-Latin American Day. And you can imagine how if we foster that linkage between Africa, the continent, Africa, the globe, Africa, the continent, Africa, the diaspora, how culture of peace can become integral to the linkages and the interaction between people across the oceans and across the borders. I end in this particular theme, an aspect and pillar, by mentioning that for the first time ever, Africa will host the 6th session of the United Nations Permanent Forum for People of African Descent in April of 2027, in, of course, close cooperation with the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights and the whole Secretariat of the Forum. And I would be very, very keen to have the culture of peace and the concepts, the programs, the activities, the campaigns to feature in the meeting of the UN Permanent Forum of People of African Descent that will convene in Africa. So as we saw, there's a strong foundation, there is a strong base that goes all the way back to Yamoussoukro, Côte d'Ivoire in 1989, but there is also a forward-looking agenda that goes all the way forward from the decade of reparatory justice, from the second decade of people of African descent onwards and forward, and we will be happy to take that journey together with UNESCO. I thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, and thank you also for, as you highlighted, to remind ourselves that there are solid bases from all kind of stakeholder, and of course, African Union is a major stakeholder in this exchange. And thank you also for mentioning and reminding us a few important documents or frameworks, such the Agenda 2063, or mentioning also the Biennale of Luanda, that, as you know, with the Liaison Committee, we are including the Biennale of Luanda in our long-term engagement, because, as a reminder, this is a forum that inscribes into a more long-term path that we are trying to build with the Liaison Committee. I'm sure there will be, we'll come back to a few of the things that you just said, Mr. Ambassador. Thank you very much for now, for having shared with us and being with you. And I would like now to invite the real moderator, or let's, we were joking yesterday about being co-moderators in a hybrid way, Stéphanie Kapfunde. Welcome, Stéphanie. I hope we can just give you the floor.
Hello, hi, David. Hello, I think I like that introduction very much. I like how you continuously refer to me as the real moderator from all the other. I appreciate the value of technology in this conversation right now. It's really a pleasure to be present and also to have this really this pertinent conversation regarding what is essentially the fiber of our being, and just picking up from what Ambassador Ajawali was highlighting. We appreciate being one who works in culture and creative industries. We appreciate being the third C. We appreciate that there's an overall understanding that culture, in essence, is the very fiber of our being. It is what brings us together. It is what determines our identity. It is indeed what makes us us. And when we discuss the culture of peace, and especially in an African context, I'm filled with quite a bit of hope, because it is my hope that at the end of this conversation, to you, virtual colleagues and those who are in the room today, that by the end of this conversation, as leaders in our various scopes, dealing with various communities in CSOs and NGOs, that we are able to look into the nuances that already exist in our communities. What we're saying is that by the end of this conversation, my dizzy daydream is that by the end of this, we're able to catalyze existing nuances in our communities. And that is to say, in essence, we already have these elements in our being. The first speaker mentioned Nelson Mandela, and mentioned in that stead, I want to highlight the role of indigenous knowledge systems on the continent, highlighting that in essence, it is a part of our nature as Africans. Peace is within our fiber. And so as we do our various works, we're able to catalyze these fibers that were perhaps muted by changes, be it what colonialism muted, be it what has been forgotten through lost knowledge systems. So this is very, very exciting. But enough of me. I would like us to move on to, this was just my attempt at reminding you that, yes, indeed, I am the real moderator. Moving on to our conversation, I want to reach out to Milton, who I hope is standing by. I'm excited to hear Milton speak, especially because he is one of the colleagues that very much ahead of its time was working in peace, in the research of peace, the interculturedness of peace, what positive peace is, previous work with the Institute for Economics of Peace, and now doing his own innovation, which is quite cutely, Elisa saying happy. Milton, I really look forward to your remarks regarding the Pact and the Manifesto 2000. I hope you're in standby to share with us, and I look forward to asking you a couple of questions thereafter.
Thank you very much, Stephanie, and thank you, colleagues in Paris from UNESCO who have put together this amazing forum, really, for discussing peace, discussing how it's our shared responsibility. And I think that's very much my first point to make, that the most important thing about fostering a culture of peace is raising the awareness that this peace thing belongs to all of us. Every single person can be doing more things or less things that make the world peaceful. And that's vitally important. I'm not sure if I can share my screen.
I think our colleagues in the room will share it for you. Or maybe.
Oh, okay. I had gone ahead and shared something. So I will race along to maybe the fifth or sixth slide, where the point, the meat of what I have to say is based. If we look at the world today, there's a lot of angst, there's a lot of activity that's indicating that conflict is just around the corner. It might not be in the media on the African continent, but we can't forget the things happening in Ethiopia and DRC, in many other countries that maybe can take away from our hope. And of course, the big conflicts that are happening in Russia and Ukraine, in between Israel and Palestine, and so on. There are also developments, for example, in things such as AI that are worrying everyone, and everyone's asking themselves questions. How do we make this work for people on the ground? What does this mean for the future of peace? The Manifesto 2000 did something very important for me. It basically, as I said, pointed the finger at every single human being on the planet and said, we are responsible for peace. We can do more things that can build more peace among us. And these are things such as respect for others, rejecting all violence, sharing time and resources, demonstrating good development and peace building practices, and also participating in everyday life. The Pact for the Future, I'm so lucky because Ambassador Al-Jawai is here, and he said to me in Nairobi last year at the AKUN and Anumdi AGM, what the Pact for the Future and SDGs are the answers to the question, what is a good life, if you ask them to everyone. If you asked a person in the rural areas, a young woman, a young man, a person with disabilities, and you ask them what is a good life for you, the answers to that question are found in the Pact for the Future and all its 56 actions. The answers are found in the SDGs and all its targets. So one of the most important things we need to do when it comes to building cultures of communities is move from these things being mere aspirations and then implementing them on the ground every single day, that people can see and feel these 56 actions. One of the things that I recommend is a framework developed by the Institute for Economics and Peace, an organization I did a lot of work with in the past years. And what this is a simple framework that can be translated into different languages and applies across every context of attitudes, institutions, and structures that build peace. And if you look at the 8 pillars that are on your screen, they're again everyday things that exist in every community and every institution that people can buy into. Things like a well-functioning government. We'll look at service delivery, leadership, communication between the government and its people. If you look at equitable distribution of resources, these are topical issues, for example, that contribute to conflicts between farmers and herders, that speak to things such as the unemployment, availability of jobs, and so on. You look at things like the acceptance of the rights of others. You can go into communities and speak about things such as, you're a human being and I'm a human being. Let's make that the beginning of our conversations. Even if we have other differences, let's not let those lead into violent conflict. If you look at things such as free flow of information, accurate information, good information that gets to everywhere it needs to be. So this framework of pillars is very, very useful as a tool. Another tool, I think Stephanie mentioned it earlier and said the intercultural dialogue and intercultural competence frameworks. These are, of course, developed with the help and support of UNESCO, but they're important too because they help people realize that the person across the fence, across the wall, across the border, across the language barrier, across the age barrier, is a person like you. You get to appreciate that there can be differences, but they don't mean you have to devolve into conflict. So in terms of my concrete recommendations, they're spread across three things: operationalizing the pact, strengthening partnerships, and mobilizing finance. I'll pick one from each. For operationalizing the pact, everyday indicators. Let's remember that. It's not about the big reports. It's about an old woman who had 2 goats last year, and this year she has 15. It's about a person in a city saying, last year I couldn't walk across this neighborhood at night, but now I can. It's about saying, do you know what? At night I can hear the dogs barking. Peace must be lived out every single day in every single community. And we need to figure out what people see on the ground that makes them feel this way. I think at the end there, I'll also use the infrastructure, systems, and policies. You'll see that in a lot of dirty cities, there are trash cans that are there. And the trash can the dirt is gathered around the trash can. So it's not that the infrastructure isn't there, but the culture hasn't quite caught up to what policymakers and city designers are doing. So I think we need to be more intentional about using the infrastructure, the policies, the systems, and various other organizations and platforms that are there for us to build peace. They exist, indigenous knowledge systems and so on, that we can build on and use more effectively. We must also strengthen partnerships. And I think a big part of this is asking ourselves, are we using the evidence at hand? There's so much academic work going on that's not being used as effectively as it could be. And also, who's missing? There are always people who need to be brought into the room to make it more inclusive, whether it's geographically, whether it's other demographics that need to come into play. And then in terms of mobilizing finance, I'm grateful that there's so much going on in terms of mobilizing finance. But I think the one that I would like to emphasize especially is to say we need to give. We need to give. As the African continent, we need to fund our own peace-building, peacekeeping, peacemaking efforts, whether it's through education, whether it's the water issues and so on, whether it's tech and AI. But we need to start giving and supporting these efforts. So, finally, now is the time for more action. It seems like all the momentum is on the other side, and there's so much conflict and unrest and so on. But I would like to submit that we have a lot of momentum going for us too. And now is the time for more action. Let's lean into nexus and foresight approaches that bring together energy, water, food, that bring together humanitarian development and peace-building efforts. Let's be less strategic when we are working with partners. I know the resources are scarce, but let's work on the synergies and relationships more than saying, do you know what? I need to position my organization better or my agenda better and so on. We need to embrace shared responsibility. There you'll see a quote from the late former vice president of Zimbabwe, who said, peace begins with me, peace begins with you, peace begins with all of us. And that way, we can build cultures of peace. This is not just a state responsibility or state duty. It's not just the UN or the police or the churches and religious organizations. It's all of us. And finally, at the bottom there, you'll see it says, the future is not an empty space. It's occupied by the actions we take today. So by the things we do, our small actions will build up cultures of peace and actual peace that lasts well into the future. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Milton. You managed to condense a very complicated subject matter and very detailed pacts that are built on very global landscapes in a very short period of time. And for that, I applaud you. The room applauds you. Thank you very much. And to the representatives of the varying CSOs and the NGOs that are present in the room today that may read the Pact of the Future, I think you highlighted with the Manifesto 2000 that at least it embodies a sense of ownership, right? But to those in the room who are thinking, okay, there are all these big picture sort of pacts and ideologies that we have signed at a global landscape. How do I, within my community, intersect these big global ideas? If you could just leave us with just one. I know you highlighted a few already, but just so that you leave essentially something that people can utilize, something that they'll remember as a parting shot. What would you say someone working with grassroots communities at present could incorporate in their programming going forward to foster the culture of peace moving forward?
Thank you for that question, Stephanie. It's excellent. And again, I would like to point to frameworks such as the Positive Peace Framework that is easily translatable into work on the ground, translatable across languages, into things that people can see and feel, and they understand that their efforts directly contribute to peace or take away from peace. And I think that's vitally important. I think there's also a very, very important lesson in terms of finding ways to work with institutions and agencies such as government, local government, and others that might be losing trust at the moment. And the temptation is to sideline them or look at them as perhaps the enemy. But I think we need to find a way of rebuilding this trust and working with them. And then finally, I think there are so many agencies. I think Ambassador Al-Jawai mentioned, for example, that the African Union is making strident efforts to work with CSOs and citizens directly. There are things such as the Pact Innovation Forum, the ECOSOC Citizens Forum. They say off for Southern African youth and Southern African youth involved in peace building. Find the African Union, the UN documents. There are so many resolutions and agendas that speak directly to what we're doing. And I think we can find more and more partners who can fill in the gaps, maybe where we are lacking or find that we need a bit of support. And this will take the peace agenda forward in incredible leaps and bounds.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that. And at the risk of, while we're about to move on to our next presentation from Sally Mube, one little question, which if you can just compound that, well, not compound, but if you can compress that answer for me, would be, what would you say is, what are some of the very natural fibers of our communities, like in the sense of culture, that we could essentially utilize in incorporating our programming to foster a culture of peace?
Thank you again, Stephanie. And this one is perhaps the easiest question you've asked me, because the answer is Ubuntu. And this is something that is found, expressed, said, written, spoken about, sung about in African communities everywhere. I am because we are. I can contribute more to my community, to my country, to my continent, so that the continent itself pours into me. So this is something that we can really, really harness, this awareness of Ubuntu, this innate African philosophy that is very, very deep in everyone's thinking and everyone's feeling, that can be very concretely translated into peace outcomes that people can see and feel. When Ubuntu is applied across tribal, across racial, across socioeconomic, across national divides, it will do something. It'll do something positive, and it will build cultures of peace.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for your time, Milton. And I think your contributions tie in very well with our next speaker, as I highlighted, Sally Mube, who is a part of the Equality Now team at present. and some of her past work. Honestly, I consider her a feminist hero who has done quite a bit of enriching work with empowering women at grassroots levels, their participation, be it political, social, economic, and all round, like I said, a feminist hero to me, really. Sally, I really look forward to hearing your take regarding the unspoken diplomats that are in our community. Speaking of the natural fiber of who we are, as far as African communities are concerned, women play a very, very eclectic role. The matriarchs, their role in fostering the culture of peace. I really look forward to some of your case studies based on the work that you have done, and also good afternoon to you.
Thank you, Steph. Good afternoon, good morning, depending on what time of the day you are connecting. It's an honor to join this conversation, which is also timeless because we are all connected by air, by land, by water. And whenever there is any instability in any space, we are not okay. So there is global pain. The insecurities that is affecting others is rubbing into us that we are all collectively not okay. So to get us started, I'm going to share not anything new, but make it a bit personal so that we can live to the aspirations of the Manifesto 2000. When we talk about women, I want to invite delegates and participants in the room to really unpack on the titles and names of women in all areas of your lives. When you unpack who women are and the intersectional identities they carry, and we take a life cycle approach of unpacking their role and mandate from childbirth, from conception to childbirth, to rearing children, to the adolescent life, to adulting, and to when we transition to where what we have named death take us to. So normally when we talk about peace or how peace has been framed for the public eye and the media space, it's men in suits and tables and agreements, it's documents where women are underrepresented and there are please find attached women. And girls and young women's voices. But to just bring our collective attention to then say, by the time we were now framing peace agreements or instruments or normative frameworks, women over generations had already started, doing the work. So we have seen women in communities holding space where they even through our grandmothers, the stories they tell us. We wake up to the music and the songs of women who will be cleaning or who are doing the yard sweeping. In those songs is the richness of the messages that comes us into the day, and it's part of already institutionalized practices where through song you are launched into a day. During the day, they're in different conversations, whether it's the faith place, it's the traditional councils, it's in the markets, it's around family table conflict issues, around sharing resources, issues around even navigating the anxieties that we collectively have. So we have seen women through song and dance. We have seen even in bereavements, there's a role of a person called a Sawira, who will be pointing even, some of the discomforts of that family to try and bring it in humor and comedy, which we have framed now and codified as comedy. But in many African traditions, we have seen in Mozambique, post-conflict, in the Great Lakes region, in the markets, in South Africa, in Zimbabwe, within the different generations, women in the elderly, women in political institutions, even women as healers. And when we look at our African diet, there are certain foods that calm us. So women have been very intimately intentional to that. Even in homes, there are certain plants that are known that this tree or this shrub cannot be in a household shrub because it causes conflicts. There are proverbs, and intergenerational wisdoms that are culturally transmitted by women, where you are not supposed to eat this, or people of this particular tribe, you will not do certain things like this. And the issue of matriarchal power, where you'll be told if you hit a woman, you are going to get a bad omen and you will suffer. So we then see that there are practices, proverbs, things that are boundaries that have been culturally institutionalized. There are also issues around the song and dance to process the pain and to also mediate and navigate, whether even within siblings, from even the family kitchen table, on how do you share resources or a meal when we have little. So moving fast forward, because time is unkind, when we talk about the Pact of the Future and how it really states it in text in terms of addressing systemic and structural issues, we would see that the gap has been around ensuring that we have legal framework and institutional support and protection issues that link to international human rights law that allows for women to be also on the table, not just to be protected or to be consulted, but for them to take the lead. And also to understand the issue of exhaustion that happens and the issue of navigating or reforming migration, because when we talk about the Manifesto 2000 commitments, it's also looking into when women are destabilized, when we are not putting infrastructure that enable women to be in an ecosystem where they can play their role for collective well-being. It means they are always on the run and fragile, and that proven intergenerational wisdom or model will not be sustainable for us. So my time is nearly almost up. I'll wait for other follow-up questions, but I would say to end this conversation, it's an invitation to say when we program, peace happens in an ecosystem that need our intentional design with women, being led by women for women, and us making sure that they take the lead in informing us to say, where do we allocate resources? How do we sustain what is already working? What are some of the way where we acknowledge and celebrate them for those that have different expertise, where they're disturbing witchcraft laws that are even driving femicide for elderly women, yet they are the havens of where we draw our calm and collect. So issues around safeguarding the beacons of peace and ensuring that we continue to acknowledge and code and sustain through the whole macro housing infrastructure resourcing mechanisms. So I think with this conversation is a call to action for us back as Africa Day loads on Monday to say all those women in all areas of our lives, they have been a catalyst of why we are peace practitioners and why we are prioritizing this. Let's tap back into that wisdom and pay forward, because we have inherited the privilege of peace. We need to pay it forward to other generations and to all in all areas of our life. Thank you, Stephen. Back to you.
Thank you very much, Sally. Thank you so much. And I really want to dig my heels into this conversation, woman to woman. But at the risk of us hogging this conversation online, I'm going to reach out to my physical moderator, David, over there in Paris, to take over for the next bit of this conversation.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Steph. Thank you, Milton. Thank you, Sally. That's already very much inspiring. My brain is making a connection all over the place, and I would have already plenty of questions. But as you say, and thank you for reminding us that on Monday is Africa Day, 25th of May. Let me switch to French et continuer un peu avec notre intervenante en personne, Brenda, et peut-être ramener un peu la conversation vers la diplomatie culturelle, le storytelling, l'héritage et tout ce qu'on vient d'entendre. Je pense que ça fait beaucoup écho aussi à ton travail et ton expérience. Qu'est-ce que tu peux nous dire par rapport à ça?
Bonjour à tous, j'espère que vous allez tous et toutes bien. et que vous êtes aussi content d'être là. Merci à David et à Stéphanie de me recevoir cet après-midi. C'est un honneur pour moi d'être ici. Donc moi, je m'appelle Brenda Ouadjetokofi. Je travaille dans la diplomatie culturelle et dans le management de projets culturels en Afrique. Donc c'est mon travail en day-to-day, comme on dit en anglais. Et moi, je vais vous raconter un peu ma vie, parce que je pense qu'on a beaucoup parlé de notions, du manifeste culturel de 2000, mais je pense que aussi avoir une expérience un peu pragmatique de ce que c'est que la diplomatie culturelle, ça donne un peu envie aussi. Donc moi, j'ai commencé dans la diplomatie il y a 4 ans maintenant. Je suis allée au Bénin dans un premier temps parce que je suis béninoise de ma maman et ivoirienne de mon papa. Et c'était juste avant la demande de restitution des biens culturels du Bénin. En 2020, si je me trompe pas. En 2017, Emmanuel Macron, qui venait d'arriver au pouvoir en tant que président français, avait évoqué cette envie de vouloir restituer une partie, en tout cas tout ce qui était possible comme bien culturel aux pays africains. Et le Bénin a été un des premiers pays à faire officiellement cette demande. Et ça a un peu mis le feu aux poudres, puisque c'était un précédent, en fait, c'était sans précédent de demander quelque chose comme ça. Et puis là, maintenant, on est près de 10 ans après et on voit où le Bénin en est quant à la restitution de ces biens culturels. Ils sont arrivés avec la restitution de 26 objets, finalement, 2021-2022. Et puis, ils ont un peu surfé sur cette vague de restitution des biens culturels, de développer son patrimoine, de montrer que les pays d'Afrique, c'est pas que ce qu'on peut penser ou toutes les idées qu'on peut avoir post-épisode colonial. Et maintenant, ça reste, et c'est, en tout cas, j'espère que ça sera aussi une des grosses puissances dans le golfe de Guinée. En matière de tourisme, en matière de développement. Et ils ont compris comment faire de leur culture un véritable outil diplomatique. Cet outil diplomatique-là, il est un peu connu. Je pense que toutes les personnes qui ont dû faire de la géopolitique ont entendu parler de ce qu'on appelle le soft power. Voilà, qui est un concept qui a été théorisé par Joseph Nye dans les années 90-2000, où maintenant on n'utilise plus le hard power, donc tout ce qui est militaire, tout ce qui est économique comme outil diplomatique, mais on va plutôt s'orienter vers la culture. Et je pense que l'Afrique, en tant que continent, a vraiment son rôle à jouer quant à son soft power culturel. Voilà, ça c'était pour le Bénin. Et puis après, moi, j'ai un peu erré un peu partout en Afrique. Et il y a 2 ans de cela maintenant, je me suis posée au Cameroun. Et je pense que le Cameroun, c'est vraiment l'exemple même de ce que c'est que la paix en Afrique et comment on fait pour que notre patrimoine devienne vraiment un outil de communion et d'unité. Quand vous allez au Cameroun, la première des choses qu'on vous dit, c'est le Cameroun, c'est le continent. C'est l'Afrique en miniature, en fait. C'est ce pays qui va regrouper énormément de choses dans quelques frontières. Et puis, ils ont cette fierté aussi, je pense, qui doit être communiquée à tous les pays en Afrique, de se dire, nous, on est africains, on a les outils pour faire les choses et on préfère rester dans notre pays à nous, développer, faire les choses pour que soit les artistes, soit les personnes, en tout cas les locaux, qui sont là et qui ont envie de faire les choses puissent avoir les moyens de les faire. On va souvent, beaucoup de Camerounais sont à l'étranger, mais ils ont toujours cette envie de rentrer, de dire que moi, mon pays, c'est mon pays, je suis fière de venir de cela. Et donc ça les fait revenir et ça les fait développer le pays. Et puis moi je suis née ici, je suis ce qu'on appelle un enfant de la 3e culture, puisque j'ai mes parents qui sont nés en Afrique, moi je suis née ici, et là la seule envie que j'ai depuis quelques années en fait, c'est de retourner en Afrique, de prendre mon expertise à moi qui m'a servi et que j'ai réussi à engronger pendant quelques années partout, en Occident et autres, et puis de revenir le faire, la proposer à pas mal de personnes en Afrique, au Bénin, au Togo, au Ghana, et voilà. Mais merci beaucoup de m'avoir écouté.
Merci. Merci et merci pour avoir mentionné le software. On va, j'espère, revenir sur ça bientôt. Parce que j'aimerais bien aussi voir dans la salle les questions, mais là, I switch back to English. And I'd like to give the floor also to another person, panelist that should have been sitting here, Blessing Abeng. I hope she's connected. I saw her at some point. Now I see
Yes, I'm right here.
Ah, wonderful, Blessing. How are you? The floor is all yours.
Thank you. I'm so sad I couldn't be there. Had a quick emergency, but don't worry, it's not going to change the content of what is going to be shared today. So as Africans, we are deeply connected by community, and we're very community-led. And you would often find this in many different contexts. So you would find this in the way that we grow up, the way that we show up for each other. And I love that a lot of us have reiterated that. I want to really focus on that community superpower that we have today, just to build on everything that everyone else has said. I think that that community is not just a soft cultural trait, it's an infrastructure. And my hope is that we don't lose it, as Milton said, Ubuntu. I know the policy frameworks are important, but I think that peace lives and dies at a community level and in the structures that we build between our neighbors. The 1999 declaration, the UNESCO 1999 declaration is very explicit about this, about peace being built at a community level. And when I think about peace, it's not about the absence of conflict, but the presence of deliberate structures that help fuel that resolution. So I think a culture of peace can be designed into the structures of the communities that we build, and that's where the real work is. So the framework that I've come up with, or the way that I have sort of phrased this to help us navigate it, is what I like to refer to as IoT. Not the Internet of Things, but the identity, ownership, and trust. Identity is the first bit because I think about who we are as a people. And I remember Steph was talking about like our cultural connections and all of that is rooted in our identity. And I think that that's the root of the conversation. But the way that the world is going with misinformation and all of that, polarization has been trying to drive us apart. But one thing I really learned about polarization is that it can sometimes drive narratives that make you, that you're so tied to narratives that are tied to feelings and not necessarily fact. But yet, if we think about it, and I think one of my professors was talking about this recently, where he talked about how sometimes the polarization that we focused on is not real. Like we are driven more apart by the perception of the polarization than the polarization itself. And how you would know this is, or rather, maybe instead of focusing on the polarization, I would say maybe what we should shift to would be narratives that drive our similarities and the things that highlight our similarities and feeling of togetherness. For example, one experiment I love to do a lot is ask people, what country do you think is most similar to, say, Nigeria? And you can try this with any country. Some people would say things like Ghana, and they would be thinking geographically, culturally, maybe based on food and maybe even jollof rice. Other people might say India because of economical perspective and population size. It's the same question, but the answers often change because of the different contexts people are choosing to, or the different lenses that people are choosing to focus on. And what that tells me is that we can always find our commonality if we choose to shift our lenses and if we look deep enough. Our perceived, and technology also helps us sort of amplify the biases or the things that we hold, bringing that back to polarization and commonality and similarities. So at the end of the day, we just need to pause, check, reflect, and ask ourselves, what brings us together? And if we're leaders of these communities, we could also pause, reflect, and ask our people, where are the common grounds? Where are the things that bring us together? Some things that often help with identity framing will tie back to things like narrative. And narrative is not just about word. People think that it has a lot to do with language, but then language isn't just one thing. Language is not about a shared dialect. Sometimes it's about body language. It's about a shared emotion, things that we can relate to, feelings that it creates beyond the words that we say. And so coming back to how do we feel, how do we think, what do we want to do right now in framing the narratives that we share, listening plays a huge role in that narrative shaping process. For us to be able to understand that and find that shared identity, we need to be listening to what is said, but especially what is unsaid as well. And this matters especially for the diaspora communities who are often building identity across distance, and their digital presence can sometimes be the loudest voice that they have. that listening is catalyzed by psychological safety. So building that space for psychological safety is important. And this comes with asking questions, not trivializing moments of people's vulnerability with jokes, laughter, and comedy, but creating like a safe space that people can truly share, which would enhance and beautify the listening process even more because there would be more to listen to. And that leads me to two things, because psychological safety can be built on the last two things, the O and the T that I'm about to talk to you about. O was for ownership. And I loved Milton's question where he talked about who is missing. Oftentimes, the answer to that question is inclusion. But I want to challenge us today to reconsider inclusion, because sometimes inclusion feels like a gift that someone gives you. And I think I heard this at a school conference and it stuck with me. It feels like a gift that people give you, but it also feels like something they can take back as well. And so instead of just thinking about inclusion, how about we think about sovereignty? When I think about this, I think about our relationship between data and AI as we interact with the world on a global level. What is Africa's place in the AI world? Who owns the data? Is AI a tool that could bring us together, or is it something that could separate us? I think real peace building in a community context should ask the question of, how do we empower the people to build for themselves without force-feeding concepts that do not match or fit the continents, all in our attempt to leapfrog? Because sometimes leadership means creating the enabling environment and then trusting that the community will find their own way. Their way might be better than ours or might be better than yours. Knowing when to get out of the way and be a catalyst and not the main character in the story, I think that takes discipline and that takes maturity. The final thing here is trust, which I kind of already mentioned in the ownership part, but we need to trust in ourselves. We need to trust in the systems that we build. We need to trust the people that we serve. This is the foundation. And I believe that it will naturally reflect in the technological advancements that we build to, where we can build technology, or rather, how I think about it is the technologies built without trust in communities tend to be more extractive rather than be in service of the community. So trust is the thing I think that makes visibility more meaningful rather than being performative. And it's the one thing that could transform narrative in very unique and special ways. So in all, psychological safety comes from building that trust, facilitating open communication, embracing and reframing mistakes as learning opportunities, and nurturing collaboration and innovation. And all of that is baked into the three things I said earlier: identity, ownership, and trust. A culture of peace is not something that is declared. It is designed from ground up by the people who live it. And I think that together, that is something that we can all do, and it could become our superpower. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Blessing, and thank you, all of you, so far, to have been patient and diligent with me, managing the time. Being mindful of time, I switch back to French et j'aimerais bien inviter Elisabeth à Pampa. Ah bah voilà, parfait. Bonjour Elisabeth, j'espère que vous allez bien.
Ça va très bien, bonjour.
Bonjour, allez-y.
D'accord, merci. Je suis honorée de participer à cette réflexion sur la culture de la paix en Afrique à travers surtout un angle, le rôle des médias, du storytelling, de la représentation dans la manière dont les femmes, les jeunes filles sont vraiment perçues dans nos sociétés. Je m'appelle Elisabeth Apampa, je suis journaliste, productrice, militante féministe et fondatrice d'initiatives engagées sur ces questions au Togo et en Afrique. Alors, merci David, merci Steph. Et ma présentation va s'articuler autour du concept et des réalités et quelques solutions. C'est vrai que j'ai préparé une petite présentation qui peut être diffusée à l'écran ou non, mais je vais rapidement y aller vu le temps. La culture de la paix, pour moi, vraiment se construit aujourd'hui dans la qualité de nos relations quotidiennes, la manière dont nous nous parlons, la manière dont nous nous regardons et surtout comment nous nous racontons les uns les autres. Sur le terrain, une réalité m'a toujours marquée. Un enfant qui grandit sans voir de femmes prendre la parole, surtout dans des profils divers, finissent souvent par penser que cela n'est pas possible. Une jeune fille exposée uniquement à des stéréotypes sur les filles et les femmes va intégrer progressivement des limites dans sa propre projection. Un jeune garçon qui ne voit pas les femmes, qui voit les femmes que dans des rôles secondaires, construit des imaginaires restreints. À l'inverse, lorsqu'une communauté voit des femmes dans toute leur diversité, chefs d'entreprise, agricultrices, journalistes, artistes, leaders, entrepreneurs, commerçantes, avec leur réussite, mais aussi leur parcours de vie réel, elle construit une autre réalité, celle de l'égalité dans la dignité. Et donc, les femmes, il faudra vraiment le préciser, ont toujours joué un rôle immense dans la cohésion sociale dans nos communautés, même si ce rôle a été insuffisamment raconté. Et cette représentation influence directement la manière dont les individus vivent le respect, le dialogue et la paix au quotidien. Je veux donner l'exemple du Bénin, qui était même cité en amont, qui est très intéressant dans la maîtrise des récits culturels. Ces dernières années, le pays a contribué à repositionner le récit du vaudou en le valorisant comme un patrimoine culturel, spirituel, identitaire riche et très complexe s'il le faut, en opposé avant de ce que nous regardons avec nos films, forcément avec le Nigeria. Donc ce changement montre aussi que les récits ne sont pas figés. Nous pouvons les réapproprier, les réinterpréter et valoriser différemment. Et ça montre même au sein même de l'Afrique, nous avons la capacité de transformer nos narratifs, nos propres traditions. Et donc, c'est une manière pour moi de dire que les médias ne sont pas neutres. Ce sont nos miroirs, ce sont les constructeurs de nos imaginaires. Aujourd'hui, une jeune fille ne construit plus sa vision du monde uniquement à travers la télévision, la radio, la presse écrite. En quelques secondes, sur son téléphone, elle est exposée à des milliers de contenus. Et ça influence profondément sa perception du monde. Mais ces récits, malheureusement, aujourd'hui, ne sont pas vraiment équilibrés parce que certains sujets sont plus amplifiés. Il y a d'autres choses qui sont invisibilisées. C'est ça aussi l'urgence pour nous de renforcer l'éducation aux médias dès le plus jeune âge. Avec l'intelligence artificielle, ces enjeux deviennent encore plus complexes car les systèmes algorithmiques influencent vraiment ce que nous voyons, ce que nous comprenons du monde, notre vision du monde. Alors, moi, les vraies questions aujourd'hui à travers cet événement-là, c'est qui raconte nos histoires? Comment on raconte ces histoires? Qui est visible? Qui prend la parole? Qui oriente le récit collectif? Certains médias, dans la quête d'audience, s'éloignent même de leur rôle d'éducation et de cohésion sociale. Et donc, il est si urgent de rééquilibrer cela. Alors, nous devons justement nous réapproprier nos récits. Pendant longtemps, l'Afrique a été racontée principalement à travers des récits de crise, de vulnérabilité. Et aujourd'hui, grâce au numérique, émergent des récits de créativité, de résilience, d'innovation, de leadership féminin. Et cela, c'est vrai, ne suffit pas et nous devons construire des récits plus ancrés de nos vécus réels. Ne pas avoir la peur de montrer vraiment qui nous sommes avec nos belles histoires en Afrique, des récits de réussite assumés et très inspirants. Alors, chaque fois qu'une jeune fille va voir son histoire racontée avec dignité, respect et non dénudée, elle va élargir son champ possible. Et cela va transformer les trajectoires de vie, même orienter des rêves, des choix. Et pour les femmes, dans les médias, l'exemple que je peux donner dans le secteur des médias au Togo, après une étude récente, exécuté par l'Institut Afrique de l'Ouest en partenariat avec l'Observatoire togolais des médias et d'autres partenaires, on note que les femmes représentent encore aujourd'hui 26,9% des professionnels des médias dans le privé et 19,2% des postes de responsabilité dans les médias publics et environ 25% dans le secteur public. Ça veut dire que les femmes sont, oui, présentes, des femmes comme nous, mais restent encore sous-représentées dans les espaces de décision, de narration. Et dans ce contexte, c'est pour ça, moi, je vais parler de 2 initiatives qu'on a eu à mettre en place au Togo. Il y a IAO Association, qui accompagne vraiment les jeunes filles à renforcer leur pouvoir d'agir, leur confiance et leur capacité à se projeter comme actrices de changement dans leur communauté. Ce qui fait que chaque année, on essaye vraiment d'aller dans les écoles pour sensibiliser. On a un chiffre de 500 à 1000 jeunes qu'on arrive à adresser en collaboration avec le ministère de l'Éducation, avec une académie de leadership au féminin pour mieux adresser la question de la prise de parole en public. On travaille sur des questions de pensée collective, des activités en milieu rural avec des projections de films thématiques et des espaces de dialogue qui nous permettent vraiment de co-construire des choses. Et l'association des femmes professionnelles des médias aussi, qui a été une initiative récente qu'on a mise en place, qui œuvre aujourd'hui pour renforcer la présence des femmes dans les médias, derrière la caméra, afin qu'elles puissent produire et porter leur propre récit. Et donc pour moi, la paix se construit aujourd'hui dans les récits que les sociétés produisent sur elles-mêmes. Et chaque fois que nous reprenons ce pouvoir de raconter nos réalités à travers nos documentaires, nos téléréalités, nos médias traditionnels, les contenus mobiles, voilà, la création de contenus aujourd'hui, nous reprenons le pouvoir de transformer vraiment nos imaginaires et nous devons vraiment travailler sur nos récits et les angles que nous choisissons pour raconter nos histoires. Je terminerai surtout en posant cette question à nous toutes et tous. Aujourd'hui, lorsque nous voulons prendre la parole, lorsque nous voulons nous filmer, lorsque nous voulons raconter nos récits, est-ce que nous sommes vraiment en train de construire le monde idéal pour les générations futures? Est-ce que nous réussissons aujourd'hui à mieux parler de nos filles, à nous parler de nos femmes, à même visibiliser pas forcément celles qui sont déjà populaires, donc dans nos médias, dans nos écoles, dans nos familles, sur les réseaux sociaux? Nous devons encore plus nous engager à partager des récits positifs, réels, inspirants, relayer cette Afrique incroyable, rayonnante, telle qu'elle est aussi dans sa vérité, dans sa dualité, dans ses forces, et de s'abstenir pour moi aujourd'hui de tomber dans la désinformation genrée surtout, et au lieu, parce que l'algorithme va plutôt mettre accent sur des contenus parfois qui choquent, des contenus de polémique, des buzz, mais c'est à nous de reconstruire le narratif. Donc, pour changer le narratif avec une culture de paix, d'égalité, de non-violence et d'inclusion, nous devons toutes et tous nous engager à mieux retravailler ce que nous communiquons, ce que nous partageons, comment nous racontons nos récits en tant que storyteller, en tant que journaliste. Merci.
Merci, merci beaucoup Elisabeth, et merci de finir sur cette question. On va y revenir. I'd like to then give back the floor to my virtual co-moderator, hybrid co-moderator, Stephanie. If you're there, I hope so.
Did you hand the floor back to me? Quite sure. I might have missed that.
Yes.
Switching between translation?
Yes.
Okay, that's all right.
Go ahead.
That's all right. Well, thank you. Thank you very, very much, Devi. I understand that we are tight for time, and a very big thank you to Elizabeth, as well as Blessing, who highlighted that optics are everything in a digital world, as well as looking at traditional media systems. And speaking of which, storytelling plays a very big role in that particular part. And we have Anesu Chikumba, who is a storyteller herself and a community. She brings communities together in the culture and creative industries, and who is going to share her piece quite quickly. Anesu, sorry to put a rush on you, but we are very eager to hear what you have to say as we tie this conversation in a lovely, neat bow. Can you hear us loud and clear?
Yes, I can hear you.
Lovely. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. So I suppose to just get straight into it, one thing that I have been reflecting on recently is that conversations about storytelling often focus on stories themselves. We spend a lot of time asking which stories are being told, which voices are being amplified, and how narratives shape perceptions of communities and countries. What we discuss less often is the infrastructure behind these stories and the systems that determine who gets the opportunity to participate in shaping public understanding in the first place. Questions such as who has access to training, to publishing opportunities, who gets visibility, develops audiences, and who is able to build a sustainable creative career all influence whose perspectives become part of the public record. For me, these are not only creative economy questions, but participation questions, because participation is increasingly taking place through culture, through media, and storytelling. I think that this is particularly relevant when we talk about peace building, because peace is not only about the absence of conflict, but also about whether people feel represented and whether they feel they belong, whether they have opportunities to contribute to how their communities are understood. And much of that understanding is shaped through stories. So the media that we consume through images, films, books, and even the conversations that we're having online every day on X and on Instagram or on all of these social media platforms, and the content we encounter through digital platforms are all contributing to how we perceive places and people. Perception is often shaped through shared and repeated narratives, which is one of the reasons that representation matters. So representation matters in peace building because understanding often begins with context. Creative work helps humanize people and communities by allowing us to see experiences that may be different from our own. It helps move conversations beyond our assumptions and creates opportunities for empathy, for understanding, and connection. One of the biggest shifts over the past decade that we've been seeing is that young people are no longer waiting for traditional media institutions to allow them to tell their stories. They're using social and digital media to publish their photography, podcasts, and films. And they're documenting and also sharing their own realities, directly contributing to how their communities are understood. So through Unpublished Africa, a platform that I founded, I have spent the last 4.5 years building pathways for emerging African visual storytellers. And we've created entry-level opportunities for photographers from 29 countries to publish and to exhibit their work. And we've also facilitated in-person programming. And this has been across 16 cities in 9 African countries to date. And through exhibitions, publications, photo walks, and professional development programs, we've been creating more opportunities for people to contribute their own perspectives to broader conversations about Africa and African communities. And over time, we've realized that supporting storytellers requires more than encouraging people to create work. It requires local storytelling ecosystems that provide training, publishing opportunities, audiences, peer networks, and pathways to sustainable careers. Without that infrastructure, many important perspectives remain invisible. One lesson that has emerged from this work is that creative work is not simply creative output. Creative work is a way for documenting communities, preserving memory, and contributing to how societies understand themselves. For us, our objective has never been about replacing one narrative with another, but it's been about creating balance by ensuring a wider range of experiences and perspectives are visible. We have also learned that storytelling becomes more powerful when people are supported to sustain it. And through 4 cohorts of a program I developed, Creative Business Studio, photographers across the continent have come to understand more about things such as pricing, contracts, branding, and business development. Because creative entrepreneurship creates agency, and it allows people to participate economically through their skills, ideas, and cultural knowledge while contributing to their communities. Sustainable storytelling requires sustainable storytellers. And when people are able to build livelihoods around their creativity, they gain greater agency to participate in their communities and to continue contributing their perspectives over time. The same principle applies to community. Through Unpublished Africa photo walks, hundreds of creatives have come together in East, West, Central, and Southern Africa. And while photography has been the activity that's brought these people together, what has often emerged are new relationships, collaborations, and a stronger sense of belonging. Several of our Creative Business Studio alumni have also gone on to organize these events themselves. They are leading local communities and are creating opportunities for others. And we've seen our participants moving from attending these events to leading them. And in many ways, that shift from participation to ownership is one of the most encouraging outcomes of the work. And I think that these conversations become even more important as AI becomes increasingly influential in shaping how information is produced and distributed. So historically, visibility influenced perception, and visibility is increasingly influencing the data that digital systems learn from. AI systems learn from the information that exists online, which means that they learn from stories, images, perspectives, and experiences that are visible today. So if African experiences are underrepresented online, they are also more likely to be underrepresented within the systems that learn from digital content. This is one of the reasons why supporting storytellers is becoming more and more important. Conversations around AI should include questions of ethics and bias, but they also do need to include conversations around representation, because the stories available today will influence how future technologies understand our societies tomorrow. Through our programming at Unpublished Africa, we've learned that storytelling creates opportunities for people to contribute their perspectives, to connect with others, and to participate in shaping how their communities are understood. And for me, that is where storytelling connects most clearly with peace building. When people are able to participate in shaping how they're represented, when they feel that their experiences matter, and when they have opportunities to contribute to the future of their communities, we create stronger foundations for belonging, social cohesion, and peaceful societies. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Anazu. Thank you very much. It really creates a kind of storytelling, if I can use this word, since we are using this word in my mind throughout the speakers, like all of you, talking about role models, storytelling, and who tells the story, and who or what is the story about, and who is telling the story. That's one part of the thing. I'd like to, if possible, to have all speakers back online, the speakers online, to see all of them, if possible. And I'd like to open the floor to the questions. I'm glad that we are very much on time, so we can have really relaxed exchange with the room. I hope there will be questions. Start thinking about your question. And while you start thinking about your question, maybe I would ask Brenda one remark or one perspective about the concept of identity that was mentioned by a few of the online speakers, specifically Blessing mentioned it related to her field, but you mentioned, and thank you for mentioning, the restitution of cultural heritage, and what about this dialogue between heritage, identity, and also the experience of Blessing and yours. Et tu peux parler en français tranquillement.
Ok, d'accord.
Oh, c'est comme tu veux. Merci aux interprètes.
Oui, merci beaucoup à toutes les personnes qui traduisent là-haut. C'était un grand soulagement du coup. Pour la question d'identité, je dirais que c'est devenu une nécessité un peu pour les pays africains. On en a parlé, le Bénin a un peu rebalancé les relations qu'il a pu avoir avec les pays occidentaux en faisant cette demande de restitution. Et ça lui a aussi permis de renouveler son identité culturelle au devant de la scène diplomatique culturelle internationale. Moi, je pense qu'au niveau de la perspective pour parler de son identité, il y a un exemple que j'aime bien donner, c'est l'exemple du camp franglais. Je ne sais pas si ça vous parle ou pas. Au Cameroun, il y a un phénomène qui est assez particulier. C'est un pays bilingue, donc français et anglais. Et parce que ce ne sont pas des langues qui sont innées dans ces peuples et ces tribus. Ils ont décidé de créer quelque chose qu'on va appeler le camfranglais, qui est un mélange en fait entre le français qu'on parle tous les jours, l'anglais et on va dire de l'argot ou du pidgin. Et la première chose que vous faites quand vous arrivez au Cameroun, c'est on vous parle camfranglais. Donc si tu speaks camfranglais, on sait que tu es de là-bas. Et c'est vraiment un marqueur pour se reconnaître, pour savoir qu'il y a une unité entre les personnes qui sont bilingues, les personnes qui parlent français et les personnes qui ne sont ni français ni anglais, mais arrivent à trouver comme ça leur moyen de surfer entre ces deux choses-là. Donc oui, la question d'identité, elle reste présente. Après, je pense que c'est une bonne idée aussi d'être en capacité, comme les Camerounais, de créer une identité propre qui nous permette de naviguer entre la multiculturalité à laquelle on fait face de plus en plus actuellement. Voilà.
Merci beaucoup. Merci. Je pense que tu as pris un très bon exemple. Merci. Oui, maintenant on ouvre aux questions. Je vous demanderai de vous présenter, pas la biographie entière, s'il vous plaît. Nom, prénom. Question précise, si possible, et si possible de dire aussi à qui la question est adressée. Comme ça, on essaie d'être efficace et aussi de permettre au plus grand nombre de personnes de poser la question et de panélistes de répondre. Monsieur Rotary, vous êtes le premier. Et après, madame derrière en rouge.
Bonjour, je suis Jean-Marie Poinsard, représentant avec Cyril du Rotary auprès de l'Unesco. Et j'ai une question pour Milton.
Oui.
Milton a parlé de IEP et des 8 piliers de la paix positive. C'est une notion qui nous est tout à fait familière puisque nous organisons des séminaires de la paix pour des jeunes Français et Américains avec IEP. Et donc, pour être court, ma question est la suivante. Milton, quelles sont vos relations avec IEP, puisqu'il y a un bureau d'IEP en Afrique, et est-ce que des séminaires, est-ce que des informations sont organisées avec IEP pour justement disséminer ce concept de la paix positive en Afrique?
Merci pour la question. Milton, do you have, I'm not sure actually if you, online panelists, you have the translation. You should have. But I'm not 100% sure.
Yes, David, we do have the translation. And thank you for that question, John. And I smiled a little bit when you mentioned you're from Rotary, because I am, in fact, a Rotary Peace Fellow for Uppsala University. So Rotary is doing a lot of work, I think, globally to advance peace on the ground and also its understanding through scholarship. So in terms of my relationship with my links with IEP, I am the former director for Eastern Southern Africa, but I can connect you with the current director, a lovely peace fellow as well, whose name is Arinola. They are extremely interested in spreading positive peace in partnership with Rotary and with other organizations so that it works at very high level at meetings such as, those held by the African Union and SADC and IGAD and others, and also at a very basic, at a grassroots level, where you're talking to people on the ground and making these pillars come alive for them every day. So I would be happy to share with the organizers those contacts for you. And it's work that I think has a lot of value in driving everyday peace.
Thank you, Milton, for the answer. Thank you for the question. There was a question in the back, a lady in red. Yes, the floor is yours.
Alors bonjour, je m'appelle Wina, je suis militante panafricaine de la RDC. J'aimerais poser une question à madame à droite en rouge. Tout à l'heure, vous avez parlé de soft power et comme quoi on devrait user de notre soft power africain, etc. J'aimerais poser une question du coup sur cette idée que le soft power de la culture ait remplacé le hard power de la force en Afrique, Pour les populations qui subissent la réalité du terrain, ce discours est déconnecté des réalités matérielles, dans le sens où pendant qu'ici on danse sur de l'afrobeat ou autre à l'Unesco, l'armée américaine elle vient de mener des frappes aériennes massives au Nigeria au nom de la protection de la communauté chrétienne. Et pendant qu'on parle de la culture de paix, l'Est de mon pays qui est la RDC est à feu et à sang pillé par des milices armées pour alimenter les multinationales au coltan, etc. Alors la culture, j'ai envie de dire, c'est magnifique, hein, je ne dis pas le contraire, mais elle n'arrête pas les missiles. Et ma question est donc la suivante. En célébrant uniquement le soft power culturel, est-ce qu'on ne dévie pas l'attention des vrais rapports de force et comment peut-on parler de culture de paix si l'on refuse de nommer et de combattre l'impérialisme militaire et économique réel qui agresse nos peuples aujourd'hui ?
That's what happens with these questions, right?
Donc, tout d'abord, merci pour votre question. Je pense que cette question, elle soulève pas mal de problèmes sur ce qui se passe sur le continent africain, sur les relations entre l'Occident et l'Afrique et sur le fait que, comme vous le dites, malheureusement, en mettant en avant la culture comme un peu glamour, comme vous l'avez soulevé avec l'afrobeat ou d'autres courants musicaux ou littéraires, ben ça invisibilise beaucoup les questions qui sont un peu plus pragmatiques, comme la région du Kivu. Après, je vais être très franche avec vous et je ne vais pas faire quelque chose qui me dépasse en fait. Je reste dans la culture, c'est mon domaine de prédilection en fait, et je me vois très mal répondre à votre question alors que je n'ai pas les arguments pour le faire. Donc pour le coup là, je vais botter en touche. Je ne renie pas tout ce que vous dites. Simplement, je pense que c'est pas à moi malheureusement de répondre à cette question parce que j'aurais pas les arguments et je serais pas légitime pour y répondre. Voilà.
Merci en tout cas, merci. C'est des questions qu'il faut poser. Oui, je vois les panélistes, mais je prends la question de monsieur. Oui, vous. Et après, on fait réagir aussi Stéphanie, Elisabeth. Mais allez-y.
Bonjour à tous. Donc, moi, je suis l'artiste Abou Afripop. Donc j'ai créé justement ce genre du même nom qui est l'Afripop, qui est un mélange de racines africaines, hip-hop, culture populaire, où dans l'idée vraiment, j'ai envie d'aujourd'hui de faire partie de ces artistes justement qui se réapproprient le narratif africain de par notre art. C'est-à-dire que nous-mêmes, on soit en capacité de raconter nos histoires passées, présentes, et la belle future aussi qu'on veut que nos enfants puissent compter. Donc moi, je suis né au Mali, je vis en France, mais vraiment l'idée... c'est que nous-mêmes, justement, on puisse affirmer notre africanité, notre amour et prôner dans notre art, justement, cet amour pour l'Afrique, ce retour aussi vers l'Afrique, parce que notre matière grise, elle a besoin de retourner là-bas pour aider. Mais attention, lorsque moi je parle d'Afrique, c'est vraiment, pour ma part, peu importe la couleur de peau, classe sociale ou religion, c'est vraiment, pour moi, l'Afrique, c'est cette part d'humanité qu'on a plus ou moins tous en nous. Donc aujourd'hui, ma question, elle est un petit peu pour vous tous, à savoir comment justement par rapport à cette réappropriation du narratif africain, vous vous mettez en relation ou vous pensez justement cette relation avec les artistes pour y participer.
Merci pour la question. I will hold on Brenda for a moment. And I'd like, actually, I see 3 hands raised online that I guess you want to react to previous questions. So what I would do is I give the floor to Stephanie. And then Stephanie, you manage, please, these 2 or 3 reactions we have online. Please keep it short so we can also take 1 or 2 more questions from the room. Thank you.
No problem. Thank you very much, David. No problem. I think I just want to jump into, I know that Brenda might have taken a step back there, but I think just a comment rather to say when we given the well-roundedness of this conversation, maybe hopefully it won't be an answer to the person in the audience, but I think when we look at the culture of peace and fostering a culture of peace, we're looking at our grassroots sort of communities. We've highlighted the importance of how representation, the power of media, the power of communication, even the artists who spoke in the audience there, that as an artist, I want to represent my country. And I think it would be the authenticity of yourself, and even tapping into what Milton was highlighting as well, looking at the Manifesto 2000, where peace is something that we have an individual responsibility for. And so as an artist, you have an opportunity to tell your story of identity as authentically as you can. And listening to Brenda talk about being a third culture kid, within those very interesting sort of intersections, the best way is essentially to tell it as you understand it, as an artist. And this is how we express ourselves. So that would be a comment to the creative in the room. And then just a wide sweeping sort of comment about cultural diplomacy is that we're looking at the role of what we create and what we foster within our communities, whether it be through communication, through as NGOs and CSOs, how we engage with our communities. This is the role that arts and culture plays in diplomacy, in fostering peace. So perhaps not necessarily in that direction, but when we're looking at a grassroots sort of approach was the comment that I was going to add. But moving on, I'm going to hand over to Elizabeth, who I believe can hear me, who I'm not sure whether Elizabeth would like to comment. Elizabeth, I'm going to give you 2 minutes to please do share your comments, and then shortly after we'll move on to Sally and wrap it up with Milton.
D'accord. Vous m'écoutez?
Oui, allez-y.
D'accord. Alors, tout ce que moi je voulais dire à la dame qui a posé la question tout à l'heure, c'est tellement sensible et réel ce qu'elle dit. Mais c'est aussi ça le rôle de la culture, apaiser. Les guerres ne commencent pas seulement sur les champs de bataille. Ça commence aussi dans les esprits, les récits, les imaginaires, comme je le disais un peu en amont. Et c'est exactement à ce niveau, les industries culturelles et créatives interviennent. Le cinéma, la musique, les médias. La culture va permettre de dire ce que la politique n'arrive plus à dire sans violence. Ça veut dire que, moi je l'appelle souvent de l'activisme créatif. Donc après les conflits, d'ailleurs aussi, la question ne va pas être d'arrêter la guerre seulement. Il faut revivre ensemble, il faut reconstituer le tissu brisé. Donc la culture va intervenir dans la déconstruction et la reconstruction déjà de l'imaginaire, de la mémoire collective. Et ça va aussi permettre aux jeunes de sortir de la logique de la vengeance. C'est à travers la culture qu'on peut retravailler ça et de recréer un sentiment d'appartenance commun. Sans la culture, la paix va être très très fragile selon moi et les imaginaires de guerre vont continuer de vivre. Donc, quand on a la guerre dans un pays où il y a des situations de conflit, les artistes, leur rôle est d'apaiser. Leur rôle, c'est de raconter des histoires pour quand même repeindre autrement la chose, pour dénoncer, pour revendiquer. Et c'est beaucoup d'artistes aujourd'hui, c'est vrai, il y a ceux qui vont être dans le divertissement total et il y a ceux qui vont s'engager pour quand même mieux délibérer la parole sur des questions essentielles de la société. Merci.
Merci beaucoup, Elisabeth. Steph, I think you mentioned Sally should go next, right? 2 minutes.
Thank you. So for me, also to add on, it's a quick emphasis to say in this, as we gather together in positioning the role of arts and culture to tackle global fragile peace issues, is to acknowledge that power holders who can make peace happen and be sustained and be resourced and be adequately be regulated, and systems have strong oversight mechanisms. They are human beings. And by them being human beings and us being Africa, we come from somewhere. And what grounds us is how we were raised and the cultural fabric that knocks in our conscience. So in building on indigenous knowledge systems and our power and our knowledge, it's also acknowledging that the leverage we need to make decision makers get a wake-up call on what has worked and that they are human beings with an Ubuntu accountability and that they're African is to redirect them to what melts their hearts, which is their aunts, their mothers, their sisters, and people that they have a soft spot for. So that's our leverage. And on others, it's our leverage, it's our entry point. Because for some, you cannot access them, but their relatives in the women's infrastructure we have framed can access them over a phone call. Even when they're in the middle of the meeting, they'll walk out because they even swear with their grandmother's name before they make a decision. And they are supported by those women in their lives. So it's a leverage, it's an entry point, and it's also something that is practical, not to ignore the systemic and structural issues, but to then look into how does that align the rights framework, or how do we create a soft landing for normative frameworks to breathe life into them so that the policymakers, we knock to the Ubuntu so that people can be activated to do their work. Not because it's new, they've done it before during the ending of slave trade, during the liberation movements coming together, and the most recent COVID. We went back to our Ubuntu, our Africanness, to survive when the global ecosystem was disrupted. Now it's disrupted again. So it's time to build on the arts and culture because that's what holds us together. And it has worked before. Thank you, and back to you, Steph.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sally. Thank you, everyone, for your contributions. Milton, I will give you only a minute if you still have your hand up. As we're ready to hand over to... Sorry, carry on.
Thank you very much. And thank you to the participant to ask that question. And I think you can see how important it is from how everyone just wanted to have a word about it. So I will skip over the parts of my answer that deal with, ownership, identity, and culture, and move on to just 2.5 points. The first is that I think as an African continent, we're doing a lot to be bigger in the multilateral space. The African Union, the SADC, the different RECs, IGAD, COMESA, and so on, are all doing incredible work to make sure that the voice of Africa is heard, the voice of Africa is recognized, and its interests are protected against the ongoing interference of proxy influences, soft influences, and so on. And I think that's a big thing. There are also efforts such as Article 109 network, which specifically is targeting UN reform, so that things such as the veto power aren't used as broadly as they have without Africa's voice, without Africa's input, and which makes the multilateral space a little bit lopsided. And then the other thing that I wanted to mention is that it's important that now as well, we're looking at things like just value chains. A lot of the influence that's coming in is because of our resources, things like critical minerals. So the fact that we can look at these just value chains, address issues such as illicit financial flows is extremely, extremely important. And then finally, our diaspora is an important handle on this matter as well, where we can spread awareness, spread correct attitudes in terms of that question. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Milton. You can always hear a researcher when they speak. I've got Blessing, who definitely wants to contribute. Blessing, are you ready to jump in?
Oh, yes. Thank you so much. I think I just wanted to lend a quick thing that could be really helpful. A big chunk of my conversation was about polarization. And the thing with polarization is politicians, media, all of these things leverage that tool to be able to drive our differences more than they want to highlight our similarities. One of the biggest tools that I have found is that culture and creative spaces help us shift perspectives and beliefs. A lot of the decisions that we make are based off beliefs that guide that action. So you first believe something, that belief translates into the action that you the belief translates into a thought, and the thought translates into an action. And one of the things that data has found is that beliefs are rarely ever changed by facts, because sometimes we spotlight the feeling in our memory that we associate with specific conversation. So when people talk about inflation, for example, we don't talk enough about how inflation leads to wage increase. Wage increase happens, but that is not the emotion that we're immediately associated with. We're more associated with all of the negative things that happen because of how it makes us feel, which is why stories are such a powerful tool to be able to help drive communication, drive beliefs. The only way most times that you can change belief systems are often based off stories and things that touch on that feeling. So the framework I was going to provide is, sometimes when you're dealing with your stakeholders, ask yourself, are they a logical stakeholder or are they an emotional stakeholder? And in this specific moment, what kind of action does it require? Is it a push action or a pull action? And if it's a pull emotional action, for example, that is going to leverage storytelling heavily and a lot of the cultural things that we rely on, where they change things without us even noticing that it's happening. But if it's more like a pull logical, then you can use data to tell the stories or reframe it in a way that is logical and it drives action. So those are different ways. Everybody has their space. And one of the biggest lessons I've learned this year is that in life, there will be advocates and there will be people who are not advocates, right? People who would probably be like you, who are fighting the good fight. And those two people have roles in the society. Nobody is less important. Nobody is more important. The work that you do is important to be able to make the advocate move forward in their way. And the work that the advocate does is also important to be able to help your work move forward as well. So hold those two thoughts in your mind as positive things and see it as work that has to go on, and everybody has to, soft power, hard power, everybody has to be working together to ensure a better society. We're all working for one Africa.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Blessing. That's a very solid take, And I'm just, I want us to maybe hand back to the room. I'm sure, David, there's some questions in there that are going to set the panel alight again and get us talking. I also see Anesu has something to say, but let me just hand over to back to David, and then a few questions on the floor. If not, then maybe we can come back to Anesu.
Hello. Yes. Thank you,
Hello.
Steph.
Yes.
For giving back the floor here. I think I'm afraid I have to close. I know, it's always like that. There are more questions, but I'm still very happy that we created quite a debate. It's always hard, and especially it's very hard. Thanks also for the people in the room, and especially I would say in this case the people in the room, because I know that this hybrid format, when majority of intervention are online, can be quite challenging also to follow. I would like really to thank you, all of you, for your professionality and diligence. And Stephanie, thank you very, very much. I hope that this has been inspiring for all of you. And I hope you could have also taking something home to reflect or to check online, or we will be happy at the liaison committee to share the contacts also of the speakers online if you want to reach them out for follow-up questions. They have already expressed their willingness to be stalked by you, so no problem. We will take care of that. Thank you very much once again. Thank you, Brenda. Thank you, all of you. And once again, thank you, Stephanie, for moderating hybridly this with me. And thank you all once again. Thank you very much. I think we are smoothly fading into the closing session of this forum. Thank you very much. No, I've been master of ceremony, moderator, co-moderator. So I'd like to introduce you for our closing session, the president of the liaison committee, Madame Svetlomira Stoyanova, and Mr. Julien Pelot, director of the division of partnership. Please, a round of applause for them.
I'm the one supposed to start, apparently. So great to see you, Svetlomira, again, and over the past week. And thank you so much for taking the time for being here and all the investments that went into preparing this forum. We know that this is on top of your normal job and for many of the members of the NGO committee, and we really appreciate your investment and the time that you take to connect with us, to prepare, to discuss, to agree, to compromise. It's not always easy, but we really recognize this investment from the whole team and also from the participants here and online. Thank you for being with us. Thank you for staying so long. We were a bit worried that, on a Friday afternoon before a long weekend, the room would be completely empty. And it's not. So I think that's a really good indicator of your commitment and your interest. And also it's a great indicator of the rich discussions that took place over these days, over these 2 days. And really the fact that, a discussion that had a focus as part of Africa Week on water turn into a broader discussion on peace and sustainable development, on education, on resilience, on human dignity, is quite, how can I say, it really demonstrates these connections that exist in UNESCO's mandate. And the fact that, the culture of peace, which we have discussed during this forum, it's not an abstract idea, but it's something that gets constructed across the boards in different fields and through this dialogue, through these exchanges, and these exchanges not just by stakeholder group, but by bringing us together really, and that's what I think a contribution that UNESCO can make to really try to promote these connections between civil society, youth, diaspora, institutions, the African Union, and that is also very much anchored in UNESCO's global priority Africa, and the fact that we need to give life to this priority, and the big way to give life to this priority is to make these connections and to think together about solutions that we can bring collectively and individually to the challenges that are faced on the continent, but also globally. So I also want to thank the Africa Group for the trust that they have placed on us by including this forum in the very rich program of Africa Week. It's a new thing, and I think we'll do it again. If you agree, should we do it again? Yes? And it's also a good model, I think, that these NGO forums shouldn't be disconnected from other things that happen at UNESCO, and that there are good opportunities to make these connections. So thank you for being the trailblazers on this. A special thanks to Ambassador Emile Ngoy Kasongo, the permanent delegate of the Democratic Republic of Congo to UNESCO, and to Her Excellency Ambassador Hadjo Sani, who was on stage with us on the opening, the permanent delegate of Nigeria. We really appreciated your participation in the opening. Of course, I didn't follow the script that they gave me, so now I have to check what I forgot to say. I think I already said, one of the big emphasis that the Director General has put since he joined UNESCO is about networks and how we can better leverage these networks. And you know, we have very rich and vibrant networks, and I have myself over the last 4 years witnessed really the dynamism and the benefits that UNESCO draws from its NGO network. But the power of this network can be even stronger when it is connected to other networks, to our field office network, to our UNESCO chairs, to our Category 2 centers, to our Goodwill ambassadors, and to other actors that are supporting our Priority Africa work. And this is not the end. I think the discussions that we had over the last 2 days have set the stage for a rich program of action and initiatives that will take place and unfold over the next few months and years. And so please take out your agendas and already mark them for the Biennale of Luanda, which will be in October in Angola. There is a few others Africa-based events that will take place later this year and into next year. And of course, I have to say it, the International Conference of NGOs in December here at UNESCO headquarters. This will be a key moment to mobilize the NGO community to also reflect about this forum and other activities of the NGO network over the last 2 years, and to chart the way forward in terms of what we have learned and what were some of the successes, but also what we can do better. And finally, I also want to thank, well, I already thanked you, Svetlomira, of course you were here. So I thank you again, and the NGO UNESCO Liaison Committee, the Comité de Pilotage, how do you say that in English? The steering committee, all the moderators, all the speakers, the Priority Africa team in the sector for external relations and Priority Africa. And of course, I have to thank my own team as well, Sabina and the whole civil society partnerships team that have put a lot of work into this and in coordinating across the house for this forum to be a success. So thank you all so much, and finally thank you, the audience, for being with us, for engaging, for sharing your views, and you know, to make this forum alive. So a big round of applause to all of you, and thank you so much. And over to you.
Thank you, Julien. Thank you for your kind words. Allow me to catch a phrase that you mentioned, and I think that it was something that we spoke about at the very opening on the 19th, which is what are the concrete measures that we take even after the forum is finished. First of all, I would like to express my gratitude towards the fact that for the very first time, a forum organized by the Liaison Committee is part of Africa Week. And I think that brought very different visions and expressions coming from the room and variety of voices. And I think that is crucial in order for us to have the conversation alive. I would love to also mention once again, because I think it's very important, that this forum happened because of the collaboration with the Division Priority Africa. The director of the division, Mr. Mohamed El Farnawani, was in the room with us today, and he was in the previous days as well. Maybe something that I would like to underline that my colleague Davide mentioned on stage earlier. This forum was co-organized with the NGOs in official partnership as well, and I would like to especially thank them, and also maybe speak a little bit about the fact that some of them not only helped us form this forum and the panelists and the ideas that were expressed, but also they presented some of the initiatives that were part of the call for action that I would like to speak with you again today, because I believe it's a crucial part of this collaboration that we have started and is being expressed in this forum and will continue to be expressed in the international conference as well. So the call for action is an initiative that we have started at the beginning of this year, which is open to NGOs globally, in official partnership, in not in official partnership with UNESCO, who are working towards advancing a culture of peace in Africa. So far, until April, we have received 20 different initiatives, 3 out of which were underlined in yesterday's panels about water, education, and youth. And I'm really happy to say that we're expecting, and we already have more initiatives coming up. And what I would like to underline is that this is a moment for us to see how can we mobilize the civil society to see what they're doing, to connect them, and to see how can this be promoted in this room in December during the international conference. So this is my call to you to consider the call for action, which will be open until the end of the year, in order for us, as I mentioned at the very beginning, to see what are the concrete measures and actions that we can take, and that we can even continue in the future as well. Advancing a culture of peace in Africa from roots to resilience, this is the title of our forum, 19 of its kind, in which I think we have managed, with your help, with the audience help, and with all the conversation that happened in this room and informally after all the panels. Yesterday, I have to say, it was a very vivid discussion that continued even outside of room 2. These conversations are the seeds that we need in order to continue and foster this dynamic that was created in the previous days, in order for us to see what are the next steps. How do we continue from here on? And maybe I will catch a little phrase from the ambassador from the last panel for today, which was about hope and healing. And what is this process? What does it include? Which are the concrete measures that we can envision together in order to have concrete actions? And finally, maybe I would like to thank all my colleagues from the Liaison Committee, because this is, as Julien mentioned, a volunteer contribution from our behalf, but we're very happy to say, all of us, and I'm very glad to see my colleagues in front of me today, that this forum was created with a lot of love, with the help of the Division for Partnership and Civil Society, and I would like to thank everyone who was included in this process, who is in the room with us today. I also don't follow scripts very well, but I hope that you managed to capture the emotion that is with me on stage today. And please, even though this is the formal closing of this forum, feel free to continue the conversation as we have with you in the previous days in different places around the house, to continue and to see what are the next concrete steps that we can think of together. Once again, thank you, and I hope to see most of you in December in this very room during the International Conference of NGOs. Thank you.